The Indominus Rex from Jurassic World was a large hybrid theropod dinosaur. The Skullcrawler from Kong's Skull Island was a large two-limbed reptilian monster. Which one would come out on top if they were to go to battle? Well, let's go over some of the stats. The Indominus Rex. In Jurassic World, Indy the I-Rex was 40 feet long and about 20 feet tall. The T-Rex was about 13,000 pounds in her prime, although it would seem as though Indy was lighter. She was probably a little heavier than Rexy with the addition of her muscular long forearms, leaner muscles, and thicker hide. So maybe about 13,500, being that when they were battling each other, they looked around the same size. Secondly, the Indominus Rex has a large head that has jaws that can open up almost to a 180-degree angle. She has powerful forearms with sharp claws. Indy can also camouflage and can also do so thermally. She possesses intelligence and can adapt fairly quickly to changing circumstances. Now on to the Skullcrawlers. These terrors from Kong's Skull Island are subterranean carnivorous monsters with very strong forelimbs which they use to move around. Let's look at the largest one. Let's say this creature is 95 feet high, almost 200 feet long, and weighs 100 tons, which is 200,000 pounds. That's 186,500 pounds heavier than Indy. They're also very vicious and fast-moving. Their tails are prehensile, as are their forked tongues, and they're able to grab tightly with their hands. Their bites are razor sharp, and they can basically hook onto anything they bite as their teeth seem designed to do so. They seem to have very durable skin that can withstand bullets and fire to an extent. They also have incredible fighting stamina, especially when you consider these animals live underground and have to tunnel and move through the deep pressures of the earth. They can smell their prey via heat sensing. They also have very strong bones and can take quite a beating. So, if Indy were to go up against the largest Skullcrawler, she would be completely unmatched to fight it directly. Even though she's smaller, it would be more agile. 1, it could whack her with its tail. 2, it could rip her to shreds with its teeth. 3, she could try to camouflage and hide thermally to avoid detection, but that's all she'd be able to do to survive. She would not be able to fight it directly because the Skullcrawlers are also so durable, and because her teeth are not as strong as theirs that are designed for tearing, she would practically do no damage to this thing. 4, it would either use its tail or tongue to squeeze the life out of her and suffocate her, breaking every bone in her body as it tightens its grip. And 5, it could grab her with one of its limbs and slam her to the ground and put all of its weight on Indy to crush her while tearing her throat out. Yeah, so up against the Alpha Skullcrawler, Indy would be dead in minutes, unless she could hide. Now, to make the battle more fair, let's put her up against a smaller Skullcrawler. These guys are estimated to be about 12 feet high, about 40 feet long, and weighing about 80,000 pounds. Of course, they still have a lot of weight over Indy, but she'd probably have somewhat of an advantage. Let's see how this fight would pan out. Indy detects monsters in the graveyard on Skull Island. Her nerves are on fire, and in response, she lowers her body temperature, slows down her heart rate, and her chromatophores start to trigger her scales to blend in with the surrounding environment. One of the Skullcrawlers lazily drags right past her. It stops momentarily to stick its tongue into the air, sensing something, but not being able to see what it is. Indy sees this as an opportunity. She's right next to it, still camouflaged. She gets up and quickly ambushes the creature, stepping on its tail with one foot and then climbing onto its back with the other. The sudden addition of weight to its body sends a Skullcrawler toppling onto its neck. The animal's forelimbs are very strong, however, and it's able to push itself up off the ground with Indy on its back. She bites into the back of its neck and it howls. Indy is surprised when the creature whips its head back and a long tongue wraps itself around her neck with surprising force. Indy pulls at it with her forearms. She can't get it loose, and panicking, she leaps off the body of the two-limbed monster and rolls. The monster is right on her, immediately jumping her. It holds her down with its two powerful limbs, which it uses to pull its whole body and maneuver the ground. Indy bites the Skullcrawler's face and kicks out at it with her hind legs. She keeps missing because, well, the body of the animal is so thin and it has no back legs. This confuses Indy. She does a death roll, but the creature doesn't let go with its tongue. It wraps its tail around her body too, which frees up its hands to claw at Indy and beat her senseless. Its arm length is so much more than that of hers. It is able to reach the back of her as well as the front. Indy tries clawing the creature and she scratches at its forelimbs, the only thing she can reach. She bites into its face, which seems to do nothing. She sees an opportunity. There's a steep 10-foot drop ahead, and she charges for it to throw herself off it and onto her back. She lands with a sickening thud. The creature let go its grip with its tongue, but still grapples with the I-Rex. Indy is able to right herself and sit atop the creature. She claws at its neck with all the might that she can muster, determined to kill this thing. Behold, it bleeds. She swings down her head to bite into the charred neck, but her head stops mid-bite. The Skullcrawler had caught it, and it's holding her head away with mind-boggling strength. Indy has her mouth open in anticipation of chomping down on its neck, but she can't reach it. The creature ejects its tongue into Indy's face and wraps its tongue around her jaw to snap it shut, then rolls her over by twisting her head uncomfortably to the side, so she has no choice but to roll. It sucks its tongue back into its skull and whips Indy in the face with its tail. In anger, Indy charges at the creature and tackles it onto its side. Indy lands on top of the Skullcrawler and bites into its neck again, but the creature pulls her away from it by using its tail to wrap around her throat. Even though the animal looks scrawny in comparison to Indy, it's powerful and its muscles amazingly dense. The animal is not releasing its grip from off her throat, and Indy is starting to suffocate. Once again, she claws at the tail, trying desperately to get away. She thrashes her body as much as she can so that the animal can release its grip. She tries clawing at its face, but it's smart enough to keep its limbs out against her chest so she cannot reach its face or neck. Then something horrifying happens. While the tail of the Skullcrawler is still wrapped tightly around Indy's throat, the creature leaps away from her and begins to drag her neck with overwhelming power. For some reason, Indy has a flashback of her dying in a similar manner, a monster grabbing her around the neck and pulling her to her death as she is helpless to defend herself. She tries to find purchase with her foot claws, but she's unable to right herself. To her horror, the Skullcrawler is headed for a dark trench that seems to tunnel straight into the earth like a gigantic mouth. It dives in headfirst, and Indy crashes into the trench, her large body getting stuck at the opening. She holds onto the outer edges of the hole for dear life, not wanting to get sucked in. The creature is able to turn around somehow with its tail still around Indy's neck to hook its teeth into her. These teeth, once they bite in, are very hard to get off. Unlike Indy's teeth, they grow backwards into the throat of the Skullcrawler, so that if something is in their mouth and tries to get away from its mouth, the teeth automatically hook in deeper. Indy feels ripping in her side and neck. The creature is biting into her, hooking its teeth, and then ripping shreds of skin away quite easily. Indy is totally vulnerable in this position. She struggles and tries to snap at the creature, but the way she's lodged within the trench opening leaves her completely defenseless. She finally is able to use one of her hind legs to push on the outer edge of the hole and pull herself out. However, the tail of the Skullcrawler is still wrapped securely around her neck. In a fit of rage and panic, Indy reaches over and bites into the monster's tail, while thrashing side to side like a dog. She bites and scratches at it until it's forced to let go. Indy knows that this fight is useless, and she tries to get away. Unfortunately, she's not fast enough. Her feet suddenly topple out from under her as the Skullcrawler's tail wraps around her two hind legs, which sends her sprawling. She turns back around to try and get it off by biting the tail, but this time it isn't letting go, and she's being pulled back into the hole against her will. She hooks the claws of her forelimbs into the ground ahead of her to try and stop her from being pulled in. She tries to wriggle free, but as powerful as she is, nothing is happening, and her stamina is being depleted. The creature lets go for a second, only to wrap its powerful tail around her upper body. Indy feels like she doesn't want to strive anymore. When she's right at the edge of the hole, she uses both her hind legs to stabilize herself right outside of it. All four of her limbs are starfished above the trench. This gives her the ability to prevent being pulled in. What Indy forgets is that this leaves her underside totally vulnerable. She feels an intense shredding pain in her belly as meat is ripped out in chunks at a fast pace. It's eating her alive. In this horrific situation, Indy has no idea what moves to make. All her four limbs are spread to keep her from being pulled into the hole, but the monster's tail is keeping her pinned there. She's pulling, and the Skullcrawler is pulling, while also devouring her. Indy lets her forelimbs fall. Her back legs slip, and she is limp at the entrance. She lets the creature pull her in, and she bites at the tail again. She can see its nightmarish face like a ghost demon staring back at her with no eyes from deep within the hole. At least, face to face, it cannot bite into her belly anymore. She roars at it, her strength failing. It latches onto her face and she bites into it too. Still, she is being pulled deeper into the hole. She lets it happen. What else is she going to do? She feels her body being pulled deeper into the earth where it's harder to breathe. Suddenly, there is an instant drop into a cavernous area, just big enough for Indy. The creature is gone. It's quiet and dark. Indy tries to use her senses. The Indominus Rex is unable to sense heat, but the Skullcrawler can. Indy is too worked up to go into stealth mode, and she's losing blood. The injury in her belly was worse than she thought. In an instant, the Skullcrawler is on top of her. It wraps its tail around her head, rolls forward, and uses its momentum to bring Indy's head over it so she does a tummy tuck roll. Indy lands onto her back, and the creature leaps onto her. She staves it off with her arms and legs. It snaps voraciously at the I-Rex. She kicks it off, but for an animal with only 2 limbs, it's amazingly nimble and relentless. She rolls onto her stomach to protect her underside while the creature tears away at her slightly more defended back. She whips her tail at its head, which does nothing. The creature slams down, her jaws shut, and once again squeezes her neck with its tail. Indy's stamina is almost all gone. She struggles to breathe and kicks, slashes, and tries to bite, but every attempt gets weaker. Indy is losing so much blood. Her vision starts to get blurry. She feels the tail release from her neck, and she's able to breathe once more. Minutes pass by, and the creature has mercifully stopped attacking. Indy wants to get up, although she would not know where to go after having fallen how many feet down into the earth. She tries to get up, but her mind cannot get her legs to do what she wants. She just lies there, sleeping. She's so tired. Only a few minutes later, Indy wakes up to movement. Something is nudging her gently awake. It feels good. She hears the sound of licking and uses her eyes to look down to where her stomach is. It's hard to see in the dark, but what she does make out is a picture of an animal's skull. The end of its mouth seemed to be coated in some shiny liquid. The Skullcrawler looks up at her as it rips more of her intestines out from her stomach. The 2 animals just look at each other, one having the time of its life enjoying this new meal, the other lying there confused as to what this animal is doing next to her. The Skullcrawler digs deep into Indy's chest area through her stomach and pulls one of her lungs out straight through the opening. Indy feels as though it's immediately harder to breathe. Her brain can't think right now. All she wants to do is sleep. So she sleeps. That concludes this theory battle. Now, what do you suppose would have happened to Indy if she had stayed out in the open with this creature? Well, she still would have lost the fight, even against the smaller Skullcrawlers, and here's why. Number 1, based on her fight in Jurassic World, the only reason she won against a Tyrannosaurus Rex is because she had 4 arms, and she was also fighting against an older dinosaur. If the T-Rex had had long forearms like hers, it would have won that fight. Based on what we know, secondly, about the Skullcrawlers in Kong Skull Island, they have longer and much more powerful forearms than that of the Indominus Rex. Even though they only have 2 limbs, they have opposable thumbs to be able to grab onto things with surprising strength. They also have a very long prehensile tail that's basically an anaconda. They have a prehensile tongue as well, which we see has its own measure of strength. So that's like 2 additional hands. And their teeth are also very powerful and curve in backwards towards their throats to make it nigh impossible for something the Skullcrawler has bitten into to pull away without flesh being torn off with it. The Skullcrawlers are also prehistoric creatures that are built for taking down large prey and dealing with the high pressures of subterranean environments. This means they have thick bones and dense muscle, and possibly stronger and larger lungs, which would also make it easier for them to breathe. They've also had probably thousands of years to evolve into the killing machines they are now. The hybrid was just created on a whim. We also saw the Indominus Rex get pretty tired in Jurassic World after her breakout ordeal and shortly after the fight with the Tyrannosaurus Rex, but unless the Skullcrawlers are completely debilitated, they seem to be able to keep going forever when fighting. So against the Skullcrawlers, Indy would stand no chance. If she had teeth like theirs, then maybe she could do some real damage, but her teeth were not really designed to tear, but more so to hold on. In a weird kind of way, aside from the camouflage, the ability to fight with her arms, and thermal ability, Dr. Wu crippled this hybrid. The winner is the Skullcrawler. Let us know how you thought the fight would go down. Thanks for watching. This has been Alteori. You ask, we answer.